Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach at Defend, Publish, and Lead, and welcome to episode 117, Planning Summer Writing, Part 1, Big Picture. These are some of the things that I just started thinking about when I realized that this episode will come out at the end of March or early April. And this is about the time where I start thinking about the types of writing projects I want to work on over the summer, and more specifically, when I actually want to work over the summer. In previous episodes, we've talked about planning around holiday breaks and working through vacation time and deciding, is it a vacation? Is it work time? And this episode is just to get a grasp on some of the big questions that I start asking myself before I start doing any planning for summer writing. So I'm hoping that this might help you as you think about how you actually want to use your summer. Next time in episode 118, we will talk about the nuts and bolts about how to plan for summer writing. But in this episode, I want to think through the questions before I can even get there and plan out some summer writing to do. I think a lot of us go into the summer with these great plans about, oh, I'm going to get all this work done. And for those of us that still are teaching or have children underfoot at home or have other things happening, summer just is not that big, open, expansive time that sometimes it's pitched to be. It might be for some people, but for the majority of the people that come and listen to the podcast, we usually have a lot going on. So that tends to not be the case, and that's okay. It's much better to be realistic about what can be done and what can't. So I just want to walk through a couple of things that I'm thinking about before I ever open a planner, sit down to write down a little schedule, figure out what projects I'm going to do. These are all things that have to happen first. So one of the things that I try to think about is how this year, this academic year, so I'm considering that my fall and spring semester, how that went. Was I getting some writing done? Did I do the type of writing that I wanted to do? Of course, a lot of us are pressured to think we're never writing enough, but that might not be the case. I might have actually done exactly what I was supposed to be doing. So I just try to review a little bit. And what I have thought about from looking at my fall and spring semesters, my fall semester was crazy. I taught an intense amount of overload. I still got a little bit of writing done. I got the major projects checked off my list. So if you've been following me for a while, I had a giant book revision to do. And then I had some other small writing projects and conference presentations, and I've gotten most of those done. I have one article left to finish out for the semester at the time that this is being recorded. But I also try to think about what's coming up ahead for me next year, because summer is not just about summer. It's always about what's happening after that and when are deadlines. Some of us have tenure applications that are due, where other people are going on the job market. So I try to think in big picture strokes, what's actually happening next year. And what I know about my next year is that in the fall, I have a fairly heavy teaching load, but in the spring, I'm on sabbatical, and I'll actually be doing some research on that time off from work from teaching specifically. So I know I'll be visiting another institution, and I'm doing some work there. And I know that I have to think strategically about my summer writing projects as ways to get up or get set up for fall and spring of next year. Because, writing is usually not self-contained. Sometimes it is, usually it's not though. If you're working on larger projects, those might stretch out over a summer, into the fall, into the next spring, and so on. So I try to think a little bit about what types of writing might be happening in the future. So, if I'm planning ahead for summer, I'm also thinking ahead to fall and spring. So in my case, since I know that I'll have that sabbatical in the spring, I need to do a couple of things this summer to be ready to do that sabbatical in the spring. So what I will be doing is I'm going to be a visiting scholar in project narrative at Ohio State. And what I want to do with that is to analyze some interviews about writing from faculty using some narrative theory and some other approaches that I haven't ever used before. So I know that. And what I also know is that I have to finish getting my interviews complete well before I leave in spring, which also means I have to back up a little bit and complete my IRB application and some other things to have my interviews approved and then my protocols approved and all that kind of stuff. So I know for me, just working backwards, I have some things that have to be taken care of because they're going to cause a domino effect down the line. So I know that's one consideration that I have about summer. Another consideration beyond looking ahead to the fall and the spring, another consideration is when am I going to take a little bit of time off? Some of us can't take summer off for lots of reasons, or even though it's off, it's not really off because you have maybe children underfoot at home, or you're traveling extensively to see family that you can't see during the year. Academics are in a lot of kind of crazy positions where we're far from our families, we might be overseas. There's lots of travel considerations and family considerations that happen during the summer for many academics. And so for me, I need to think through that a little bit. I need to think about, is there any time during the summer that I'm not going to work at all? I'm just going to say, I am not working. And so for me, how I've generally worked this out in the summers is I try to do a schedule about 3 days a week where I'm actively working my regular work hours during the day. And then I take the weekends off and then 2 days off in the week. So I have a little bit more time to spend with children that are at home. That's just me. Now, those 3 days when I'm working during the summer, I tend to only work on writing projects and not worry about teaching or getting classes set up or anything like that until August, because I usually take the first couple of weeks before the semester starts to do that. That said, I am teaching one summer class, so I also have to think about that. If you're someone that's teaching over the summer, it's very important to think through when you're going to do the teaching things you need to do, because usually in a summer, the summer session is a little bit shorter. Sometimes it's more compressed, and sometimes it's pretty intense based on the level of workload. So even though I know I'm going to have 3 days where I'm going to officially be working over the summer, I had to think through this a little bit more. And what I've decided is that even though those are going to be kind of regular work days, let's say, I have no idea at this point, but let's say I'm working from like 9 to 4 as like a regular work day, or 9 to 3. I know that some part of those 3 work days, I'm going to need to attend to teaching concerns. I'm going to need to be grading some student writing. It's a 6-week class. It's graduate level. The workload's intense. I have taught it before, but that doesn't mean that I won't have to do the prep time of setting up an online course or doing the grading. And so and this is something I'll do more specifically in the next episode where I show how I know what I'm going to be working on, how I'm going to kind of map out the time. But I'm also thinking about those kinds of big chunks in the summer. So what kinds of work do I have to do that's not writing related, that still has to fall within work time? For me, that's teaching. For some of you, that might be clinical work or field work that you're doing that's more research based. And while that's important for publication, that's not necessarily writing. So some of us are out in the field or collecting data or something like that. I would want to build in some writing time around that, at the very least, to do some writing about some of the things that were being found. So I know that those are some of the things that I have to be concerned about. Other considerations I have to think through in the summer is, where are those big blocks of time where I'm not working that aren't regular summer weeks? So for example, a family vacation. If I'm gone for 2 weeks of the summer, that does take, let's say if I'm working 3 days a week, that takes 6 days, 6 working days off the table completely. And so this is one of the reasons why I always have faculty that I work with lay out a schedule when we plan a semester or a summer, and just put big old X's through all the days that are not going to be work days, where you just accept the fact from the beginning that these are days that no work is planned. And that might mean that you find out, instead of having 80 days over the summer, you actually only have something really sad like 28. That could totally be possible, but much better to know that now. So that's something that I'll work through in episode 118 when I do the more strategic summer planning. But I just try to get a grip on that right now. I also try to look to see that I'm not putting too many days where I'm not working all stacked together if I have some flexibility. So another thing that, I don't know about you, but I try to knock out in the summer is try to get all my children's medical appointments and my own medical appointments and things like that completed. So of course, it's nice if I can get a bunch of them done on one day, but I also want to make sure that I don't have, say, 4 days in a row where it's all chopped up with medical appointments or things like that, because that's cutting into days that I could be working. And it's not that we want to be working every day, but the bigger problem is that it's building in a longer time between when I'm able to sit down and work again. So, I am not a big believer in writing every day. I know a lot of people are not in that mode now, that's not a piece of advice that we want to follow. It does work for some people, and if it works for you, fabulous. But for some people that cannot work every single day, I try to, make sure that I'm writing every weekday if I can during the school year. In the summer, I just try to work 3 days a week. I'm a little bit more flexible about when those are. Usually it's not on the weekends, but I try to get 3 days a week. So what I'm looking at is that I'm trying not to have big, long stretches where I have days that I'm not writing that could be avoided. I'm not talking about like a vacation time. I'm talking about some things that when I'm scheduling some appointments, I will look at my calendar and say, oh, well, I've got a couple of dentist appointments going on this one day. I don't want to make the very next day a whole nother day of medical appointments. I want to save that day for a working day. So that way I can make sure I'm getting some contact with my writing projects. So those are some other things that I'll look at. I also get real with what day school actually starts, both for me and my children to go back in the fall. So why I'm thinking about that now is that sometimes I can fool myself into thinking I have most of August to get some work done. But the way the schedule ended last year at my university, I went back to work for real work on August 15th, which is the middle of the month. So it really wasn't even 3 weeks in August before I was already back working again in a fall semester, which means I have to think even more strategically about making sure my classes are set up and so on. So just having all these kind of big picture thoughts, I think is really useful to just sort of decide what is happening. Another concern to think about might be, what are you doing to rejuvenate and recharge yourself in the summer? For some people, that means they're just going to get outside more. They want to devote more time to exercise, or they want to spend more time with their family, or they want to have days where they're maybe doing more scholarly reading versus doing a lot of writing. They want to actually have some time to really engage in maybe a new scholarly book or something like that they want to do. So I know last summer I did an episode on some summer reading that I was working on. I have not picked out what I'm going to work on this summer, but in general, I do try to read a couple of academic books over the summer, just so my own research, I have some time to really engage with these and take them along with me on vacation and things like that. I tend to pick books I really want to read, so it's not a punishment to have to do them. But this might give you another idea to think about, well, what are some other things I want to put in my summer to make sure that I can do that? I know another thing I want to put in my summer that I did not do well last summer, but I'm going to try again this summer, is get back into playing tennis. I play tennis kind of off and on, but I thought, well, that's something I want to put back in summer. And I'm thinking about it now in April because, yes, that means just like any other task we do, I have to look at, hey, when does a league start? What day do they play? And just think about those concerns. For parents out there, if you have children that are still of the age that need childcare, daycare, this is also a time to kind of look at what are you doing with your children when you're thinking you're going to be going to work. This was a time that I almost always had to sign up for camps and daycares and all that kind of thing just to make sure that I had some childcare over the summer. So probably if you're a parent, you're already aware of those time limitations. But at least for me, I just tried to think a little bit more strategically about that. Like, do I need daycare 5 days a week? Could I do 4 days a week and think through it in that way, and being very fortunate to be able to have a nice daycare that was close to me and affordable, certainly was a win. I know that is not the case for everybody, and it might be some financial trade-offs there, but much better to think about now, when can I get some child-free writing hours if you're one of those parents that wants to get some writing completed over the summer and you still want to get a couple of things moved forward. So hopefully these big picture questions help you get a good idea about what you might want to do during the summer. And then next week, what I'm going to do is actually do some strategic things as a little look ahead. One is just getting real about what days I actually have to get some work done in the summer. I also want to think through what kinds of projects I want to work on, because in this case, especially with a sabbatical coming up in spring of 24, I know I need to get a couple of those pieces completed for that project before I go, which means those pieces have to take some priority over some other projects I might be wanting to knock off my plate. And then there's also, of course, the uncertain nature of when projects that have to be revised, or if I have to do final page proofs or anything like that, when those come in. So I have to be aware that there might be a time period in there where something like that could come in. So I'll do that a little bit more practically in episode 118 next week. But in the meantime, I'm encouraging you to think about some of these bigger questions about what are some goals for summer, what are some things you'd like to do. And I also try to think the long game, how is the summer going to build towards some of the other things that I want to do with my writing in the future? What are little pieces I could be working on now? in a way that maybe is not quite as stressful. So just as a note too, we also will be running for our writing class in April. It will be all on summer writing planning. So I will make sure that we put that link in the show notes if you're interested in registering for that. So our online classes for Defend, Publish, and Lead are just $25 at the moment in the time of spring 2023. And they're 1 hour, they're hands-on. You can actually plan your whole summer with us in that writing class and learn how to think about time strategically. So if you're interested in knocking off that project, please join us for that. The registration link will be in the show notes. And you can also, at this point, you can also check out the Textbook and Academic Authors Association. If you have not checked that out, every week I do share a resource, and I will put a link to that organization in the show notes. But for this week's tip or strategy from the Textbook and Academic Authors Association, I'm just putting the link in there, and I'm encouraging you as some homework this week, if you haven't looked at that organization, to give it a glance and see if it's something that might suit your needs. I talked in there about how that is the cheapest organization that I belong to for the year. It offers webinars, it offers all kinds of resources, an annual conference coming up. But if you haven't checked it out, instead of showing you a specific resource in it, you can hear that in some of the other podcast episodes. I'm encouraging you to take 2 seconds to just click around in that link and see if there's anything in there that might appeal to you, and to get your discount code with us also in the show notes. We do offer a discount where you can get a discounted rate off the TAA membership as part of our partnership with them. So I encourage you to check that out this week, and happy writing.